Let's jump into calls?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Let's talk to Scott in South Carolina.
All right.
Scott in South Carolina, you're live with Eric and V.
Hey, Eric and V, how are you?
Hey!
Doing good.
Really, really well. What did you want to talk about today?
Good. Merry Christmas, by the way.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Last couple of times we talked, I addressed the topic of evil, and I think we had some pretty good conversations about that. And
yeah, you and V talked a lot about evil, and I didn't really get to dive in and give you my perspective. I don't think so, at least. Did we?
Well, I think I got your 2 cents worth. So, but I wanted to approach another aspect of it, take another stab at it, because we alluded to it along the way, and that is what we call the problem of pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. And let me begin by asking, I guess, you a question so that I'm clear on how you feel about this, at least in the beginning.
Sure.
And I think in talking with you previously, I got the impression, if you didn't say it straight out, that you, if not equate, you relate evil with suffering in the world, and in people and in the world. So let me ask you straight, just that question. Do you consider suffering, which is a broad term, and we can whittle that down, but do you consider suffering to be a part of the problem of evil?
Yes, I do. And to be clear, when we're talking about evil and the problem of evil, it's difficult to pin things down. But in order to have this discussion, and just for people who are watching who may not understand the problem of evil is the idea that an all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful God, if they allow evil to happen in the world, then why don't they stop it? Mm-hmm. That is the problem. Well, how could evil exist? Like if you were standing in a room and watching someone be tortured and you could stop it and you didn't, mm-hmm. then you would either be impotent and lack the ability to stop it. You would be, you wouldn't care. And so maybe you wouldn't want to stop it, or maybe you're just not there. And all of those things are qualities that are attributed to a God.
That's correct. And I would say that those aren't the only 3 options, but I don't think that's our conversation for today.
Sure.
But because they can't be the only 3 options, at least from this side of the line. So when it comes to suffering in and of itself, even leaving God out of the equation for the moment, is that the short answer? Yes, suffering is evil, is a part of evil, a component of evil?
I mean, suffering is a component of it, yeah.
And then my question is, what do we mean by suffering? Do we mean pain? Is that what we mean?
Well, suffering's a kind of an interesting definition. V, how would you define suffering?
Yeah, it's a whole branch of philosophy we're diving into right here.
Yeah.
Honestly, the best explanation that I've heard is that suffering is the emotional response to pain. You can be in pain and not be suffering, right? Anybody in the BDSM community can tell you that. But the suffering component is the awareness of something being wrong and you not being able to change that, whether that's physical pain, whether that's, suffering as a result of grief from losing a loved one. So I would say that suffering is connected to pain sometimes, but I don't think they're synonymous.
The dictionary defines it as the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship.
Okay. Yeah, well, I don't think we're in disagreement there as far as that goes, as far as suffering goes. I read a book years and years ago that actually argued for pain being an actual gift to us, much like a fire alarm is a gift to us.
Mother Teresa definitely felt that way. So here's the question. Could you imagine a universe where a awareness of a hardship or pain or distress could be different, that it wouldn't be so bad? I mean, I think I gave the kids in the in the playpen example last time, didn't I?
I don't remember that example.
No. So the idea would be that if we were looking at this, and mind you, this, for people who are watching this, all of this has to do with a God that is creating a universe that has these properties. And so if I were to kind of compare that to putting children in a playpen, as long as they can choose what they want to do in there, they have some degree of free will. I can throw blocks in there. I can put in, finger paints and this and that. They get to choose what they want to do with those things. But would you throw in a handgun?
Oh, I do remember that example. I'm sorry. Yes.
No worries.
I remember that.
Would you throw in a bear trap? Would you throw in, poisonous animals? None of those things are required for free will, which gets rid of that whole free will argument against the problem of evil.
Yeah, and it's a good example as far as it goes. However, the second you have more than two children in that playpen, they don't need a gun and they don't need weapons. They have fingers that can be poked into eyes. And I have two grandchildren who can vouch for that.
Yeah, but would you think, oh, there are more than two children in here? Okay, it doesn't matter. I can put a gun in now.
No, certainly not.
Why?
Well, for obvious reasons.
Yeah. So Well, the confusion here is that it seems obvious to you why you wouldn't give those children a gun, but the response that you gave just a minute ago was, well, once you have more than two kids in there, it doesn't really matter. But it kind of does, right? Like, I'm not saying they can't hurt each other.
Not that it doesn't matter if you put a gun in. Obviously, you're not going to give weapons to children.
Okay.
But I guess my point would be, and I guess the theist, the Christian, I can't just call myself a broad theist, because there's plenty in theism that I absolutely reject. So, but the Christian point of view would be the two children don't need a gun to hurt one another, is my point, and for the reasons that they would do so.
Well, while that's granted, that does not remove the point, right? That doesn't mitigate the point. The point is that a God could create a world where there is free will, where there is not the kind of suffering that we see. And if the God could do that and knew that they could do that and chose not to, I would say that's evil.
But the moment you create free will, if it's really free, you create the potential for evil. And the potential for pain and suffering.
Okay, so
getting back specifically.
Well, I disagree with you. I disagree with you. Is there evil in heaven?
No, certainly not.
Is there free will in heaven?
There's a good question. I don't know what heaven's like. I can't answer for heaven because it's beyond the realm of anything I've experienced or that we have information about. Well, so all I can do is speculate.
Well,
a good way to draw a potential comparison, granting that it is an unfalsifiable claim, what heaven is like, right, is to compare it to the rules that you have laid out, right? If this is how God's hands are kind of tied, if he must allow for free will in order to create a world that is good, and if that free will must therefore entail pain and suffering, then why would heaven be different than that? You've laid out the rules, and we're conceding that for the point for this point. Okay, granting all of that, what does that do to the concept of heaven?
Well, all we know about heaven, and I'm really trying to avoid referencing the Bible because I know you guys chafe at references from the Bible, so I'm trying not to do that. But it is my only point of reference in these kinds of discussions. I mean, my only point of it.
It makes sense. The talking about the Bible doesn't make us chafe. Referencing the Bible as an authority that we're supposed to cede things to without good reason, that's where we chafe.
No, and I would never do that because I understand your position on this.
Yeah,
but I would reference it as the authority from which I argue, and that knowing that you don't share that agreement with it being the authority. So I get that, and I wouldn't do that.
Right. Okay. So where in the Bible does it say that suffering and pain is a requisite for free will? Where does it say that God gave us free will?
In those words?
Yeah.
Nowhere that I'm aware of.
Okay. Where did you come up with these rules
the implication throughout is clear. The implication is clear throughout with commands to behave this way and not that way. Commands to go this way but not that way.
Okay. So
they all imply free will, that we have a choice to go this way or that way.
Okay. So what are the implications about heaven? Is heaven a good place? Do we want to be there?
My understanding from the Bible is that heaven is an eternity free from the burden of our own self-interest, which we call sin.
So would you think that...
So it's... Sorry. Can I just wrap this up real fast?
Yeah, go ahead.
It sounds from the kind of inferences that you're drawing across the board, and it sounds like if you're being consistent across the board, then that's great. It sounds like the implication is that heaven does not entail free will. If we are free from sin, and sin is required in a world with free will, then it sounds like in heaven we don't have free will, based on inference.
Yeah,
see, there you've got me, because I don't know what heaven's going to be like. I do believe there will be free will, but I believe it'll be a whole different existence than what we're experiencing here, because here I am burdened with my own self-interest, and I have to continually fight against that.
Well, it seems like there's definitely a lot of fighting there, because in one circumstance, just to kind of wrap up on the heaven, the point that I wanted to make is exactly what V was saying, is that the only way for that to be consistent is if you're lobotomized as an angel. And
Well, that's interesting, because even in what we would consider pre-human history in the heavens, God's own beings, call them angels for lack of a better word, rebelled. They had free will and they rebelled.
Okay, so evil.
We understand it.
Okay, so evil can exist in heaven.
The potential for it.
Okay, so then my point does not make sense, because the point that I was trying to make was that if you already believe that there's a place that can be, without evil, where there is also free will, then that means that God could create and has created a place where there is free will and no evil. And so if God could do that in heaven and chose not to do that on earth, that's kind of a dick move.
My question is, why do we even care about getting to heaven if there's no guarantee heaven is not just another earth where things are just going to spiral out of control again?
Yeah, no, I understand your perspective. I truly do. And those are fair questions. My hope is hanging on the fact that I will not have what we would call a sinful nature, that I'll be free of that. And that's what is inclined to this, what I would call this bent world. I hesitate to call it broken, but bent is a better word. But we've sort of strayed from the idea of pain itself.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, I love the way these conversations meander. I love that. But when it comes to pain itself, I wonder. I can't believe that pain itself is connected to evil as a component of evil. It is connected to evil as a result, as a consequence. But as an alarm, I mean, if I stub my toe on the bedpost in the dark, the reason it's painful is to alert me that something's wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Something's broken. Something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so look at any suffering in our world, no matter how unjust we might think it is, or how painful or how horrible, it alerts us to something being broken.
No.
And I guess what that would make.
Yeah, no, I entirely disagree with you. I entirely disagree with you. Yeah. So why can't a skinned knee be the worst that happens? Do you think a skinned knee can alert you to a problem? A stubbed pinky toe? That's fine. We're talking about genocide. Genocide is not a teaching tool. It's a vile, horrendous thing that you can try and find the silver lining, but if you're trying to use that silver lining to justify the drastic horrendousness of it, I think you've lost the point entirely.
Oh, I agree. I wouldn't call it a teaching tool at all. I would just say that it does point to something being horribly wrong.
Right.
And that's the point to make. There's no teaching opportunity there except to say something's horribly wrong.
Well, Yes, and I think that there's an equivocation happening here where you burn your hand on a stove, right? And that hurts, and so you pull your hand away, right? Maybe mitigating some pain, some damage. And that pain is a signal to your brain to get out of there, right? Because there's something wrong, something's going to harm you. And I agree with that. That's basic biology. I think the concern here is that you're saying that all pain falls into that category of something is wrong and should be another way inherently, and because it is not that way, it is painful. And I think that that is where we're having issues, because we can all agree that stubbing your toe and that signal to your brain that something is wrong, you need to look at it, is actually your brain telling you, oh, something is off. We need to fix it. Let's go do that. But I'm curious why you think that kind of signal, something is wrong from how it should inherently be, is representative of all evil or all pain.
But, well, I understand. I just think we're talking in terms of scale and degree now. I mean, where do we draw the line between acceptable pain and unacceptable pain, or helpful pain and unhelpful pain? Where's that line drawn?
Well, the line is not necessarily drawn in terms of acceptable and unacceptable here, although that's an interesting conversation to have for sure. What I'm saying is, the first example, we can give a biological reason for that reaction of pain, right? Your brain notices there's something wrong. Your nervous system sends a signal that gives you that feeling of pain that makes you go check to make sure your toe isn't broken, right? But that's all a self-contained biological thing that happens in brains. We know this to be the case. Saying that somehow that same process of a brain or a consciousness or something realizing that something is wrong and needs to be fixed can be attributed to other forms of pain, say a tsunami, right? Like it's not all the same thing. It's not all for the same reason. At least I have not been shown anything that makes me think that a tsunami is trying to tell me that something is wrong, so much as that's just, unfortunately, how things are. Tsunamis just happen. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Sure, I understand that.
Unless Scott thinks that weather events happen because of our behavior.
I don't know if I would. Scott, do you think that, I know we're talking primarily about human-caused pain and suffering, which is where we probably should be right now, but there is a lot of pain and a lot of suffering caused by natural events. Are those also signals that something is inherently wrong and used to signal that to humans? Is that kind of where your mindset is?
It is partially, if that's possible. Now I'm sounding like I'm equivocating, and maybe I am. When it comes to natural disasters, and again, I'll cite the Bible here, knowing it's not your authority. I get that, but the Bible's clear that all of creation was affected when sin entered the picture. How it was affected, I couldn't tell you the actual nuts and bolts of that. And in the New Testament, Paul talks about how creation groans for the, and that's poetically metaphoric. I get the language there, but what's interesting, and then you come to issues like global warming and how much of what we see in strange weather, or what we call unpleasant weather these days, was actually caused by human intervention.
I'm specifically thinking about, when a mega pastor says that God sent a tornado to go wipe out the sinful area where all the gays were because we allowed gay marriage. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to that kind of thinking. I'm sorry. I find that
don't ever be sorry for that.
But do you see why? But do you see why the line of thinking that you are presenting can very easily just take that small turn into that, and why we're having a little bit of trouble there?
Yeah, no, I get that. And
yeah.
I appreciate you making that clarification. No, I don't subscribe to that kind of thing, that God sends tsunamis and tornadoes and fires, and I do not subscribe to that. At least from a biblical standpoint, The Bible tells us that the rain falls on the just and the unjust, and that we are all part of the same world and are subject to the same, good and bad situations that arise in a natural sense.
Okay.
So no, I will never subscribe. I don't believe COVID is some sort of judgment from God on the population. I don't believe AIDS was a judgment upon the homosexual community. I do not.
That's good.
And I will never.
I appreciate that. That's great.
Not my way of thinking at all.
But my question then is, if the rain falls on the evil and the good, and God is the author of good and evil, then what lesson are we supposed to be learning? If God is granting good things and bad things to both good and bad people, then how does that factor into any kind of lesson to be learned at all?
Well, the question implies that God authored evil as an equal and separate entity to good. And as far as I can tell, the definition of evil, biblically and even maybe in common sense, as far as I can tell, is the absence of good. For instance, and very brief example, when I was raising my daughter, I was sovereign over my household. My word was the law. Well, I wasn't that kind of dad, but you get the point. And I gave my daughter within that household all manner of choices. And with the good choice came the implication that there's a bad choice with it. If she made a bad choice, let's call it evil for the sake of the example. Yes, I created evil by giving her the right choices she should make. If she continued with the right choices, she would benefit from.
So I see where you're going. I do want to just say Isaiah 45 verse 7 says, "I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things." So that's where I was getting that from. And I feel like
no problem with that.
It just feels a little dodgy to me.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I would point out is lack of something being good is not evil. There are things that you can do that are neither good nor evil, just are what they are. It's just like when it's my first thought is like morality, right? There's moral and immoral, but there's also amoral, right? Can you think of anything that you can do that is not good nor bad, but just is? Maybe taking a nap. Maybe
eating breakfast, or deciding to skip breakfast,
or the route you took to work today, was it good or evil? Because with the example that you gave, it has to be one of them. But I would argue that the route you took to work is not necessarily good nor evil.
I'm still here. I'm thinking.
Yeah, no worries. I actually
appreciate that.
This is what I really appreciate about you.
Yeah.
The fact is, you've apologized at times when you have thought about things or went, you know what, I'm not sure. And that really strikes at the core of a lot of my experience when I was in the church. There was this idea that if you were not resolute, if you were not, absolutely sure about a thing, that it was kind of a failing. Not that it was said directly that way, but it was kind of looked down upon. But being able to do that opens yourself up to learning and growing. And that's what makes it so pleasant to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that.
I think we should probably move on.
I don't know another way to be honest.
Well, we do have a couple of other calls, but Scott, I would love for you to call in and talk to you next time about this idea of sinful nature. And I don't want to give you a gotcha, so I kind of want to give you what I'm thinking here, okay? Okay. My view on sin is almost kind of like telling you that you're sick to sell you the cure. It's looking at human nature and vilifying several aspects of human nature so that you can be sold on, it's like breaking your leg to sell you a crutch, right? It's kind of taking things that are not good nor evil, right? Not moral nor immoral, just amoral things like being horny, and putting a negative spin on it, saying that's what's broken about you. Here's the cure. And it's something that I think is really, really, it sticks in my craw, man. And I would love to talk to you about it next time. Would you be up for that conversation?
I would absolutely be up for that. That sounds like a winner. There's nothing I'd like better than to sit down like in a restaurant and just have a lot of time to go over this
Yes.
stuff. Here we are.
Hey, if you're ever in Austin, once all this kind of settles down, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have no plans to be there in the near future, but who knows?
Well, we wouldn't want to
Hey,
be in Texas right now either, but
if you ever find yourself, if you ever find yourself in Charlotte with a couple hours to burn,
honestly, we have quite a few people out in that area. That's quite possible. But in the meantime, Scott, enjoy your holiday, and thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah, you bet. You guys do the same. Always enjoy it.
bye.
We do too. Take care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are a lot of people in the chat who are just like, sinful nature. And I agreed. But at the same time, if we shifted the conversation that way, we would have railroaded him into a conversation that he didn't call in to have.
Right. It's interesting with callers who are so willing to kind of like, oh, okay, we can go there, or like, okay, we can talk about this, because you can't just go into the weeds and just get completely lost and end up talking about something completely different, which is fun for us, but probably less fun for everybody else.
Yeah. So if it's not directed, then it may not be as useful of a tool for the people who are watching.
Yeah. Also, just in case everybody didn't know, we are the only call-in show today that is currently taking callers. So if you have somebody who wants to call a show during the day today, have them call in, and we will go a little bit long if we get callers, because we're the only one doing this week. So yeah, let's do it.
That said, for those of you who are thinking about calling in, this is a call-in show. There's a back and forth, talking at us, preaching to us, or wanting to share a 5-minute story about how you did a thing that was super cool on Facebook. This isn't the format for it. So please, please, please be kind to our call screeners and recognize the format.